Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I am your host, Greg Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, still in South Bend, still doing the people's work, covering the Notre Dame football team in from Canada. He will be leaving soon, and there's traveling stuff, which is why we are coming to you at 8:30 in the morning on the East Coast and 5:30 on the West Coast. And Jamie, when you hit and hustle, that means you're hitting and hustling all the time. Never stop. All gas, no breaks. If you got to wake up at 5 a.m. to talk about, Notre Dame football and the position group previews, then that's what you do. So how you doing this morning, my man?
I'm doing all right. I mean, how are you doing? It's 5:30 over there. So,
Yeah, you know
um,
what? I frequently wake up around this time anyway because I have the children and they wake up at various times, and I like to wake up a little bit before them just to get things.
yeah,
I don't like it when they come in and wake me up, so I'm not usually on, at
yeah.
5:30. So that's fine. And anyone who can pop into this and watch the show, we appreciate you, coming early and everything like that. So, all right. So we want to talk about we're going to finish the preview of the Notre Dame football team. We've done the whole defense. We've done the offensive line. And since the season is right around the corner, next week it's game week, we want to finish up with the offensive skill players. But before we get to that, Notre Dame picked up a commitment yesterday from the 2023 recruiting class from a defensive end who many people did not know this was coming, did not know the name, did not know about this player. So Armel Mukam, I think we're going to go with, who's a 3-star defensive end / 3 technique. What do you think, Jamie? You think this is a player that's going to end up inside, given his frame? It kind of looks like it to me, but I defer to you on that.
I think it all depends how much weight he gains. I think he could be a potential 3 tech, but I think he's athletic enough to stay outside at end. He's definitely not a Viper.
Yeah.
So I know that was like the first thing people were like, this is the Keon Keeley replacement. No, it's not. Like they don't play the same position.
Right.
It's more of a guy that's kind of like additive to what they have with Boubacar Traore and Brennan Vernon. So I guess if you want to look at it as like a Jason Moore replacement, that's how you look at it. And yeah, I like him quite a bit. I think this is the kind of guy that you take if you're going to take like, you don't want to land like a room full of these guys because there's guys that have to grow quite a bit. But if you're taking a guy with like a high ceiling towards the end of your class, this is the kind of guy you take. Like I really liked his film. I thought he's pretty new to the football. He's only played one full season of football. He kind of had stuff interrupted. He's originally from Montreal, Quebec, and they do play good ball there. Just in case anyone knows, it's actually pretty good ball. And he has a lot of twitch, consistent twitch, where you see him like react off the ball really good. I mean, you can see a lot of the pass rush traits that translate really well. You can see him kind of turn the corner. I like him. I think he has a chance to be a pretty good player.
Yeah. Just to respond to DBZ, we are on early today because, like we said, Jamie's traveling around, doing things, and you got to do what you got to do, man. Hit and hustle, right? That's the name of the game. So, yeah, I was watching his film. So, like, okay, when I see a defensive lineman like this, right, especially someone who hasn't played very often, like there's going to be things that you'll notice about a defensive lineman that I don't, right? Why don't we just pull up his film too? We'll do that. Get him going. So tell me what you see here. Like, obviously, this is a player who hasn't played a ton of football, like you said. Tell me what you see from him.
Well, obviously at the beginning of the film, and it's usually kind of stuff that I don't like. I mean, that I like. Obviously, you see him turn the corner, get and finish, get a tackle for loss. But some of these like unblocked ones, I'm like, okay, I understand why you have it because you make a play, but that's not what I want to see. Like that to me was like red flag number one on Kofi Wardlow, because I was like, every play he made was unblocked. I was like, that's not good, right? Like you want to see him do stuff like that, run through somebody, right? Here, right? Like beat a double team to get in on a sack, right? Like turn the corner. Here he is turning the corner, right? You got to have that little bit of that lean, right? I don't know if it's like true bend, but it's like a pretty good lean there, right? And the consistent thing you see is always he's the first guy reacting off the ball out of everyone on the line, right? When the offensive line moves, boom, he's moving. That's reaction. So that's what I always look for. I look for twitch, motor, finish. That's what I look for. So like right there, he won right there just because of twitch, right? And you can win with it. And here's what when we're talking about hidden hustle. Here's hidden hustle. Like
That's
you want to, you want to see exactly that kind of thing, that kind of motor, right? And just consistently getting off the ball, always just kind of gives you a chance, And there's a lot of stuff that like he overwhelmed that guy just because of his get off. But once he learns how to use his hands and stuff too, man, like that's going to be something. And hands, that's something you teach. That's something that's taught. Like that's not, but you can't teach like getting off the ball. Like you can get better at it, but guys who are good at it, like that's a skill. That's a skill, right? And so he has that skill. So yeah, I think that's the main thing with me, right? Is that he's doing it. And like frankly, too, I think it's kind of one of those things where obviously he's a guy who goes to a school that the same school in Virginia that produced CJ Prosise, Greer Martini, Doug Ranoff. That's a nice little bonus, right? That he's there. But really what it is, like, if you look at this guy is probably the kind of guy that Stanford, he was a Stanford commit, that they would hit on, earlier on. This is the kind of guy who would end up becoming a good player at Stanford. So you take a guy like this away from Stanford, it's a good thing.
Yeah, and I obviously like anytime, and this is BK era, any era, Marcus Freeman era, like anytime Notre Dame takes a low 3-star kind of project type player, and I don't mind calling him a project when he's only played 1 year of football, right? So anytime you take a player like that, like people are going to say like, oh, I don't know about this commitment, like I don't know if I like this player. And to me, that's kind of weird because, like, well, if you don't, let's say you don't take him, right? Well, then he'll never, like, having no one, that no one never turns out to be a good player, right? Like, so you're taking a chance, like you take a chance on the player, and if it works out, it works out, right? And to me, you have Brennan Vernon, you have Devin Houston, you have other players in the class who it's like, okay, like we have these players that we really like. Now we're going to take a flyer on somebody. To me, it's like kind of of course, why not take him? Like it's never a negative, right? Having someone on the team, and like to me, that's the whole thing about like recruiting too. And it's kind of a tangent, but like getting into like BK recruiting and what was the problem? Like, it's not that you bring in players like this, right? It isn't. It's that you're not getting the upside players either, right? You're only taking projects. And to me, I've always said, like, I don't have a problem with the players they take. It's just the players they're missing off, right? And the point is you have your top targets and you want to land them, right? And that's why like losing Keon Keeley is such a big deal. Not because this is his replacement, it's because you want someone like Keon Keeley, right?
Yeah.
Or Jason Moore. So that's how I feel about it. A good addition to the class. Happy to have him. And so we will move on to, I guess, the topic of today, which is the offensive skill preview. And so I was listening to you and Mike talk about on Power Hour, talk about the wide receiver position. Let's just start there. It's kind of the elephant in the room.
'Kay. 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 'K
and he expressed concern. And to me, it's the concern doesn't derive from the players themselves, right? You look at the players in a vacuum and you say, okay, I like Lorenzo Styles. I think he could have a big season, right? I like Braden Lindsey in his final year. Like, he can be a good football player. Same thing, Joe Wilkins, right? Coming off injury. Like, to me, like, that it's kind of the story of camp from this position is that one of them is the injury to Avery Davis, but the other one is like Joe Wilkins is much further along. Like, we did not think that he would be ready to go till like mid-October, right? And the fact that he's taking like 7-on-7 reps and 11-on-11 reps like 2 weeks prior to, the season starting, I think that's big, and I think that means he can help the team, right? I did not think that he would be anywhere near that, right? And he's a player that can play all three wide receiver positions, so that's very important. Jaden Thomas is coming on, right? Tobias Merriweather is coming on. Deion Colsey's coming on, right? Like, they have players who you look at them in a vacuum and you say, okay, like, really like that guy. On the other hand, as you guys pointed out, you have a lot of guys in and out of practice. Some are missing a day, some are missing 2 days. Deion Colsey's been out for like a couple weeks, right? He's coming back now, but he's starting, that he missed a lot of time, right? And that, to me, is not how you want to prepare for a team like Ohio State or like the season at all. And the numbers are already low. So how do you feel about that? I don't know if I want to say I have concern. I mean, I do have concern, but it's kind of, I don't know if it's founded in anything other than just kind of my own feeling about it.
Well, I mean, I think it's good. First of all, that we should mention, like, Thomas and Colsey, Jaden Thomas and Deion Colsey. Those guys are back practicing now.
Yeah.
Good morning, Joe Bro. And I think, like, so that's obviously a good thing, and like you said, Wilkins making progress, all that's great, Also, you have a brand new quarterback.
Yeah.
You want to develop that kind of chemistry. I mean, I don't know how much chemistry, like, and obviously they had the spring and stuff too. They're throwing 7-on-7 in the summer. There's all this kind of stuff too that people don't count into. It's like you only just count the practices that we went to, as the media went to. Like, obviously there's a lot more than that, but still, you want as many reps as possible with these guys working together. And, when it's getting like close to crunch time, you want more of those reps, right? So I do think that, it is a little bit of concerning. It's not something that is ideal. Like, you wanted those guys healthy the whole time. You want a guy like Thomas, for example. You wanted him to, like, kind of like keep growing and growing and getting him better, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, by the end of things, before we're getting to the game, he's ready to take off, right? That's kind of where you're at. And you don't know if he's like, all of a sudden he just took off. He came back and he started out, or right where he left off, he was there. He might have, right? But we also don't know that he maybe had to take a step back and whatever and get kind of used to things again. And him and Buckner had to get on the same page. Like, we don't know any of those things. So that to me is a little bit concerning, because Thomas hasn't played, Buckner hasn't played, they haven't played together. So it would be different if it's like Avery Davis. If Avery Davis, he's obviously out for the season and you feel terrible. But if he was out for just all of camp and then he came back, whatever, you still feel comfortable because he's played a lot of football. You know that he's going to be able to step in and not miss a beat, right? And you don't know that about a guy like Thomas.
And even Joe Wilkins, like, I think he's on the kind of the borderline where it's like he's played a lot more than Thomas, for sure. He's made a lot more plays than Thomas in a football game, but like, he doesn't also have that. He doesn't have the body of work that Avery Davis does, right? So he's an older player, but he still hasn't done it in games as often, as consistently as someone like Avery Davis, more so than Thomas. So that's another guy that's like, it's very good that he's getting back, because he needs to build that chemistry, because he didn't have like really any in the spring, none in summer, and now we're in fall camp. So I don't know. Part of me feels like they have enough, and I guess we can transition to tight ends here too to kind of talk about them, because I feel like they have enough at tight end and at running back to get by an opener, right? Like where you have you could have like a very short rotation against Ohio State, right? Like you could have you could have Styles, Lindsey, and then a trio of Merriweather, Thomas, and Wilkins, right? Colsey still kind of concerns me with the knee, right? Like I feel like that's going to take a little bit. Like he's got a big brace.
He's wearing a big brace.
Yeah,
You don't want to have that if you're a
right,
receiver. Yeah.
right. So I think like he's going to have to ease into it this season a little bit. But you can go with those guys, and then you can go heavy with tight ends, and backs and that sort of thing. Like you can come up with a really good game plan against Ohio State. It's like as the season goes, right, what it becomes like a lingering problem in terms of upside for the position. So something that we need to keep in mind and that sort of thing. So talking about the tight ends, I mean, okay, Michael Mayer, we know, baller, the top tight end in the country, or top two, or whatever people want to say. I'm not really, I don't want to get into an argument about it, but so you have him, you have Kevin Ballman, who has been in the program for a couple years, and I think he can be a solid player there. Same thing with Kane Barong, but I gotta tell you, man, you mentioned Holden Stays. You saw him at the open practice. You said he looked real good, and they've been showing clips. We don't see much, but we get the first 5 periods, and I tweeted it out last night. Like Holden Stays and Eli Raritan, those are dudes, man. Like they are going to be such a problem, and it's hard for me to. Someone said it was like a Joe Alt, Blake Fisher thing. And I don't know if that's true, just because there's been we don't know how they look in like actual team, like one-on-ones and team periods.
It's not, but you know what? It isn't like insane to say that, though.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't know that, but it isn't insane.
Right.
Like it, I actually, because I've said before, right? I'm sure I said it on Power Hour, but I might have said it on the Rakes Report when I was talking about these guys. But it's the best duo, the two guys coming in together, that I can remember in recent years. So like, even when, I mean, obviously Komet and Brock Wright was a really good and talented duo, and they obviously, flashed a little bit, but not, I don't think to the same extent that these guys have, or they don't look as good, in my opinion. So I think there is something to it. Like I think you're going to see in a couple years, 2 or 3 years, whatever, those two are going to be two guys playing together in 12 personnel, and you'll be able to do a lot with them.
Yeah, Stays, man. He's so long. Like it is such a problem. I don't think people, unless you've covered tight ends, right? Like it is, you can't get around them. You could be on their back and they're catching passes on you because they're so big, and you just can't get to the ball. And those guys, it's hard to not compare Eli Raritan to Kyle Rudolph because of the 9 and everything.
Yeah, that's just it's the number, but really.
He moves just like him. He does. Yeah. Like, it's hard. I can't get away from it. Every time I watch him, it's like, he moves just like him. Like he has the same kind of running style. They're similar in terms of their catch radius and all those other things. And he just,
I will say Rudolph, when he came in, it was like, that was like another level of guy, like in terms of, Christian on IC's Christian McCullum, he was on the beat when Rudolph was a freshman, and he said he was the most dominant red zone guy that he's ever seen. Like no one could guard him. Well, no one could guard him.
That played out in real life. So that's a good take that he had. I just think those two guys, like Holden Stays, to me, I just think a lot of him at this point, and so I don't know how much they're going to factor in this year, but they're going to be stars. But it's terms of what can happen this season. I think between Mayer and whoever whoever they need, whatever role they need between Ballman and Barong, right? Like Barong's more of the pass catcher, Ballman's more of the inline guy. I think that's going to be a huge position of strength for them. And they're probably gonna have to play a lot, especially early, since the wide receivers have been so kind of banged up. Who, like, of the two of them, like of the Ballman Barong duo, who do you see, like, how do you see their games playing out next to Mayer? Like, how do those two guys complement Mayer?
I mean, Barong doesn't really complement Mayer. He's more of like
They're like similar.
They're more similar, except for obviously Mayer's better, but
Right, yeah.
but and he's like bigger and can play. You can kind of trust him in line. I mean, Ballman is the better complement because you can play him in line and you can flex out Mayer and you can do some of that. You probably don't want to flex out two tight ends, so
Right.
Barong is more of like you maybe want to give Mayer a blow kind of thing. And I do think it's interesting too. I mean, sometimes you don't want to read too much into it, but when they gave the tight ends, the interviews for the tight ends, they gave Mayer, Ballman, and Davis Sherwood, who's obviously just went on scholarship.
Yeah.
And I think probably because he just went on scholarship and that was the
Right.
reason. And he's going to be more of like a fullback blocking type, right? But they didn't give Barong, and they could have not done the freshman and gave Barong, and they didn't. And I don't know what that means for Barong, but it's probably means he's not going to have a prominent role. So they're probably expecting more from Ballman if that's the case. So I think if you want to kind of read into things, that's the way I would kind of read into it.
That is interesting because all the safeties are talking, right? And like the tight end.
I mean, except for Justin Walters, right? And then and then Justin Walters, and he's not really in the mix,
right? He's
right. Like they X Watts, who obviously is playing both ways or whatever, but he came and talked with the safeties, and not Walters. So, I mean, it doesn't mean everything. It doesn't mean like all these guys, but it means something,
right?
So.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, and Davis Sherwood, I mean, I think letting him, because here's the thing about him is like he went on scholarship, and congratulations to him. That's awesome. But it's not like he's a senior.
No.
I think he's a young guy. He's like a sophomore, right? So it's not like it's one of those things where it's like, oh, he grinded for 4 years and now he's become on scholarship and give him his moment in the sun. Like, he's a sophomore. He's not an older player, so that's definitely something they didn't have to do. So I think that's a good point that you bring up there.
Also that they might run some 21 with him as fullback, right? Like that's something that I think probably I didn't really think about too much in the offseason, but I think we might see some of that.
I mean, bring back the I formation. Let's go. Like I've been as people might have noticed, I'm deep into the '96 football season. Little Mark Edwards action. So let's go. All right, so let's see. All right, so the running backs. There's been some talk. There's been a buzz about Audric Estime. Okay. This is what I'm very curious about. Okay, because people are talking about him being the guy, right? Open the season at Ohio State.
I'm just gonna right now. I'm gonna throw some cold water. He's not the guy.
Let's. I want to hear it. He's not the guy. Tell me.
I think you're probably gonna see multiple guys. That's your thing, but I don't think if anyone's thinking like, here's the thing. Everybody loves Jerome Bettis. The guy's a freaking Hall of Famer, right?
Everyone loves Jerome Bettis.
Everyone loves Jerome
Fact check
Bettis.
true.
Yes. And anyone who reminds them of Jerome Bettis, it's all, all chips are in. Everybody wants it. But there's only one Jerome Bettis. There hasn't been another Jerome Bettis. Not just at Notre Dame. Nowhere else. There's never been another back like Jerome Bettis since Jerome Bettis. You can try to do Robert Hughes. You could try anyone you want. They're not. And I'm not saying that Audric Estime is not going to be a very good back. He might lead the team in rushing this year. He might very much. But slow it down with the Jerome Bettis. This is the next Bettis. No. It's too much. And I mean, obviously we haven't seen enough or heard enough that, I mean, I've heard that he's had a really good camp and all that too, but I think they're going to play Tyree's going to play a lot. Logan Diggs is going to play a lot. And I think what will probably happen is they will kind of ride one of those. So if Estime is just crushing guys and they're running for 7 yards a pop, he's going to stay in the game. And I think there's going to be some games where Estime might get 20 carries. And I think in an ideal world, they're running it down the throats of Ohio State and he's getting 25 carries and he's got 175 yards or whatever, right? But I also think that they're going to need to get some splash plays out of a guy like Tyree and all that too. So I don't think anyone should be, it's too early to say 100% oh man, this guy's going to be the guy. I think people they're jumping the gun a little bit with it.
Did you, I don't know if you saw my comp for what we were in a chat earlier and we were talking about this guy. I comped him to Robert Farmer, who from the 96 season. I had the 96 season on my mind. That's who I saw him as. And I think similar builds, right? And similar kind of skill sets and stuff. The thing people have to understand too is, and maybe he is ready to take 20 carries a game, right? I don't know, right? No one, again, we haven't seen him, but I think he's looked good. And I think there's enough there to say he is going to be a prominent piece on this football team.
Yeah.
Right? I think he's played well enough. He's practiced well enough to.
He's going to be an important player for Notre Dame, no doubt. And it's funny because you bring up Farmer, and I'm also from just right before him, so same era, whatever. Yeah. But Ray Zellers was my comp for him because he's a throwback.
Yeah,
and really in the 90s he would have played fullback in a Lou Holtz offense.
Right,
that's where he would have played. And so, he would have done the similar kind of things to whatever. And obviously, I mean, Ray Zellers was a really good player. He had a couple just super crazy highlight reel runs.
Right.
He also was not Jerome Bettis.
He was not. No. But I just think it's very hard. And this is why Kyron Williams was such a special athlete. It's very hard to go from I'm not involved in games really at all. I'm not really involved in the game plan, not getting carries, don't really have responsibilities in terms of wins and losses and that sort of thing. It's very hard to go from that to I'm the guy. There's generally a progression, right? And this is the concern we have with wide receiver, right? Because there's not
the guys really like Kyron Williams. That is rare,
right? And there's another part too. And this is a good point by Pops. Jim Knowles is going to blitz a lot because Buckner is young. We got to be on point with pass pro. That's another thing with Audric Estime, is what can he do in pass pro? We have never seen it, right? We've seen Logan Diggs in pass pro. We've seen Chris Tyree in pass pro, right? It's 3 downs. So it's you can't be it's hard to be the guy when your pass pro isn't, because it's not like Notre Dame's just going to run twice and then throw on 3rd down, right? You got to be a good pass pro guy. So I think as a running back, We know he can carry the ball. He's a good player. He's big and physical. He's got good feet. He's probably faster than people realize, but we're putting a lot on him to say, oh, he's past, Chris Tyree or Logan Diggs or whatever. Like there's a lot that goes into the running back position. But I obviously we believe you can be a really good player for Notre Dame. It just 20 carries, 15 carries, like that might be a little much, but we'll see. Okay, so let's just kind of wrap the whole thing into quarterbacks. We've talked a lot about Tyler Buckner, obviously, in terms of what he can be, what he can bring to the offense. So I posted something. I noticed something in Matt's videos last night, and it's something that I think I've noticed subconsciously, and then I consciously kind of brought it up. Have you noticed that his throwing motion and everything, like the way he throws and everything, it's a lot cleaner than it was? I just remember last year, like I would see him throw just even standard throws, right? Like warming up. Like I felt like the release point and the arm angle and everything was always kind of variable.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it, right? It just makes me kind of nervous, right? And I feel like that has gone away.
Even Phillip Rivers and his wonky whatever, it all looked the same.
Right. It does. I don't care how it looks. I just want it to look the same all the time. And I felt like, and I'm not talking about off platform throws. I'm talking about like
in the pocket,
stuff we see
pocket.
in the first yeah. Like we're just warming up here, right? And I felt like like the release was early that time, or the release was a little bit late. Like and so that's when you see the nose down and everything. And I feel like we're not seeing that now.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that? Like, did you notice that when you were at practice or anything like that?
I have noticed that. I think he is more consistent with like release point and just arm angle and stuff like that. And taking like the off platform stuff completely off the table. I think there has been a more consistency with that. And I think too, that's a product of, this guy missed a lot of football.
Yeah.
He missed a season as a sophomore, obviously had a fantastic junior season. Didn't play as a senior. Didn't play, and you practice, and he practiced last year. But even when he played in the games too, how much was he throwing compared to, say, Jack Cohn? Like a lot less, right? And then obviously he's in the games and he's running most of the time, right? So I think kind of spring, summer of kind of like leading into being the guy, I think that has been probably more beneficial than anything. That's the other kind of scary part for opponents, not for Notre Dame, but like this guy, he's only going to get better and better because he just hasn't had that, that amount of reps, right? So he needs these reps and he's getting them now. And I think that's what you're kind of seeing is more consistency from just repetition.
Yeah. It's the thing that everyone talked about. It's like, we can't expect too much as a freshman because he hasn't really played. Right. And then that's kind of what we saw, but he was, again, he got pegged as a like a running quarterback. I don't think that's what he wants to be. And I don't think that's what he definitely was not that in high school. Right. He was a slinger. But I think he was good enough as a runner to where it's like, we have a weapon that we have to use. We're not totally confident in using him as like a Jack Cohn type player at that point, but I think we're getting to that point. It's just a question to me of like, do they have the enough weapons? Do they have enough variance in the weapons that they have to take full advantage of his skill set and that sort of thing, and just to kind of transition to like holistically, like what the offense can be. Where do you see this going? Like we talk a lot about identity, and that's something that hasn't come up in a lot of conversations or in any of the conversation that I've seen. Like, what do you think the identity of this offense is going to be? Right? Because we talk a lot about 21 personnel. We talk a lot about 12. where do you think this is going? Like, how do you think they're going to be winning most games in 2022 on offense?
I mean, I think they're going to be like more run heavy than they are pass heavy. I do think that um, I think they're going to rely on those tight ends quite a bit. I think that they're going to try to be explosive with guys like Styles and Lindsey and
Yeah,
Tyree, certainly, right? But I do think I don't want to say grind it out, because that's not what I think they're going to be, but I think they're going to lean on the running game most weeks, right? And like RPOs off of that. And
yeah,
I think that's what's going to be. It's really hard to say because we didn't really see anything. And I think they don't want Ohio State to have any idea of like
right.
what their identity is or what they want to do. I mean, if I'm Ohio State, I'm coming in thinking that we're stopping the run and beat us with the pass. Buckner, let's see you beat us with your arm. That's what I'm thinking, right? And I think that's probably the way that Notre Dame is just going to have to go, right? Like he's going to have to make a lot of throws for Notre Dame to win the game. Like he's going to be forced to, because that's what they're going to give him. And you got to. I mean, people don't like it because they want you to like impose your will. And I mean, it would be great if they are running, like I said, 7 yards of carry and they're doing that. But also, they're just going to be points of time when it's like, I mean, they got 9 near the line of scrimmage. You got to make a throw here, right? And that's what you got to do. So I do think the overall identity is going to be to, be a run heavy team. But Buckner in the running game, not like totally him, but just the threat of him is going to be big. But I mean, in this game, I just defenses all year are going to play to take that away. So that's going to be interesting to see how they kind of adjust to that.
I mean, the threat of run opens up a lot for others, right? Like we saw that a ton in 2017, right? Where it's like you're always there. You always have to account for it. You're taking players out of the box and that sort of thing. You're taking eyes off of other positions because eyes are on the quarterback, right? So he doesn't have to run for a ton of yards to affect the running game and that sort of thing. It's like you say, like we haven't seen anything. So that's why I'm asking, like, because I think about it and I just don't have a good idea of what they want to be or what they can be, right? Like I don't know what Tyler Buckner, like we don't have really a good idea of like what type of routes he's comfortable throwing. We don't know, right? Like, and so it's hard to project what kind of offense they are. I think we know, like we saw him do a bunch of RPO stuff last year. And I think he'll be comfortable with that, right? It's and they have to be good at it. That's the other thing. They have to be doing those things because I don't think they're good enough to get pegged as like a running team like 2017. I don't think they're good enough there to just be that. They need to have some variance and they need to be a little bit more unpredictable. And I think they can be with Tyler Buckner. It's just a question of like, can they keep the key people healthy? Like, what does that look like on a full game basis with, Styles and Lindsey? Like, I feel like so much is on those two guys. So much. It doesn't work if even like one of them is even healthy. Like Lindsey probably is more expendable than Styles is, but like they need both of them because that's what makes it go in terms of the explosiveness and that sort of thing, because defenses do need to be afraid of getting hit over the top, right? Because that's another thing. It's very hard to be like a run heavy team and you have safety sitting at 10 yards all the time. They need to be deeper. And so that's the key to me in terms of if they're going to be a run heavy team, then Buckner has to be a good deep ball thrower then to be an efficient team, because at some point you can just load it up, right? And that's kind of where I see like everything kind of hinges. And then his ability to run the RPO game and that sort of thing. What do you feel more comfortable with? Do you feel more comfortable with Notre Dame in 21, or do you feel more comfortable with Notre Dame in 12? Because I feel like, to me, it's 21 all the time. Like, I think that should be their base freaking formation, frankly. So, how do you feel about it?
I think it's 12. 21, I think they should use it, and I think we should see quite a bit of it.
We feel the opposite then.
Yeah, I just think like, obviously Mayor is going to be a big part of what you can do, but like, I think when you're, 21, when you're doing it and you can kind of play, and obviously you're like spreading teams out, but I still think Notre Dame with the line is going to be able to bully a lot of teams. And I still think so. I think 12, and basically what we know too of like, with kind of Buckner and kind of trusting him more as a runner and a passer, I would say that's why I feel more comfortable in 12 than I would 21 at the moment. But I hope we see a lot of 21 this year.
Yeah. And I guess, so the way I look at it is, would I rather have Ballman or Barong out there, or would I rather have one of the backs, or like maybe another wide receiver, right? So maybe, like me. Well, I guess if we're in 21, then it wouldn't be another wide receiver. So would I rather have Ballman or Barong, or would I rather have Estime, Diggs, or Tyree out there?
Well, here's the other thing. They played 12, but like George Tactics, they didn't throw to him.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so if Ballman's out there, are they going to throw to him? Like, is it just going to be like, obviously you want to feed Michael Mayer. Like, we're not stupid. You want to get the ball to your best player. But that other second guy can be a weapon. So is that guy going to see more targets? Because if you're running 12 and that guy is just a blocker, then 21 all day. But like, I do think that they can open up and they can win matchups with that second tight end. So that's what I hope to see more of.
But do you have faith in that?
I got confidence in those guys. I think they're good players. Like,
was this a Tommy Rees team? It was. Like, Tommy Tremble wasn't. They had Tommy Tremble on the team. They didn't really throw to him.
Yeah, I know, and that was a problem. Like, they should have threw to him. Like,
I think so it's hard for me.
I think they should have thrown to him more. Like, like, I think that was a thing. Like, one of the things why that New England Patriots, when they had Gronk and Aaron Hernandez, they were so dangerous is because both those guys were like, who they throwing the ball to, right? Like, that's what kind of made that. It wasn't that, you don't want to waste Gronk as an inline blocker, even though he's a great blocker. But like, obviously the guy's just, maybe the best tight end of all time, and most complete tight end of all time, just a phenomenal receiver. So you don't want to get into that. I'm not saying that any of these other guys are Gronk, but I'm just saying, like, in college football, you're going to play a lot of teams. Your tight end, like you were saying about covering the tight end, like, they're going to have a lot of matchups. And I think the good news is that they can kind of take it as depending on what they get. So it's like, okay, well, you want to play, you're going to match here. Well, this is what we're going to do in terms of personnel, right? You're going to match here. This is what we're going to do. And you take advantage of the matchups, right? Per week, and that, like, each week, and kind of see where it goes.
Do you see Notre Dame being an explosive team in 2022? Like the 15 team.
No.
Okay.
No, I don't.
So
I think that team was like, I mean, that was, I think, the most
it's hard.
explosive.
It's hard to match players. I'm just like I hesitate to bring up a
I think
year.
they'll be above average explosive. I think they'll be like, if you looked at them in like top 40 in
Yeah.
explosive play, but I don't think, are they going to be like, I mean, that 15 team was like top 10,
Right.
like explosiveness, right? Like, and I just don't, I mean, so Styles basically has to be Will Fuller, and
Yeah.
like, I think one of the things with both of those that they had Procise and Josh Adams, who was plenty explosive too. And I think, I mean, I'm not saying they have potential to get there, but like, I don't know. I just need to see more before I would make that claim. I mean,
Okay.
and then plus, I mean, it doesn't help that we go to an open practice and they don't throw the ball more than 15 yards down the field. So,
Is that
and I'm
explosive, Jay?
right. Like, yes, I mean, Lindsey took a slant and made it into a big play, but that was like about it, like, and then, I mean, Steve Angeli threw it deep a few times, but that was it. Like, they weren't doing that. Like, yeah, I mean, and it was obviously purposeful. Like,
Yeah.
but I mean, I don't think we're going to see them chuck it more. And I know that Tommy Rees knows that explosive plays matter. I don't know. I think the better odds are they're going to be pretty explosive this year and like really explosive in 2023, because you're going to have another year of Buckner, another year of Styles, Tobias Merriweather, who I think I bet he'll have a couple like big plays this year.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would expect next year, I think he's going to be a dude next year.
Mm-hmm.
And, and be like probably that big play guy on the outside. And like, until like, I mean, I don't want to overreact to Jaden Thomas catching with the one highlight video that we
got one video, man, and
yeah.
I threw it up. I was like, this is the greatest thing.
Yeah. But I think like, I mean, a lot depends on that. Like, it has to be like a guy, like, if they're going to do it, then you have to say like, wow, Jaden Thomas is a really like explosive threat.
Yeah.
And is he? Maybe he's going to be. I don't know that.
It's so hard. Like we really don't know anything, and this is the least I feel like this is the least we've ever known about the Notre Dame football team, especially offensively, because the defense at least has so many known players, right? Players who have played like tons of snaps for Notre Dame. Like, so we've seen them playing games. So you can make that projection. Well, offensively, like new quarterback, bunch of new wide receivers, new running backs. It's just like what I don't know. And there's so much of like people ask all the time about like, what are you hearing? Like even me, like I try to ask Matt, like, have you heard anything? And he's like, we've seen no practices and the coaches aren't saying anything.
Yes,
like,
they're way more tight-lipped.
Yeah, so like there's really nothing out there, right? So if people are, I see a lot of people in my mentions on Twitter talking about like X person said this and X person said that, and it's like, but they haven't seen anything.
Like our guy C-Mac here in the comments, who's like laying out all the stuff that's gonna happen. I'm like, hey, that'd be all really cool if it happened, but like,
right. Like, and we could
know.
do that. We could do that.
I don't know.
We would just be talking. Like we're just talking, and
I think that's the thing. Notre Dame doesn't have CJ Stroud, Travion Henderson, and Jackson Smith-Njigba returning, right?
Right.
Like they don't have Kyron Williams isn't back, right? Kyron Williams isn't back. Like, even you could say, even if Kevin Austin was back, you could say like, well, Kevin Austin I think he's really going
We
to
know
take
what
it
he
to the
can do.
next. And I think he's going to take it to the next level, right?
Yeah.
Like now it's like you're like, okay, level 1, right? Like it's different because everybody's doing. And not to say guys can't emerge and whatever. And I do think like a guy like Styles is going to be really, really good for Notre Dame. But like, if he's not, then they're going to be in trouble. Like they need it. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to say CMAC all in on Audric Estime. I mean, CMAC is going in, right? 22 for 135, 2 touchdowns. Would take, okay? That's fine. Optimism, right? Like, let's go. Like, I would take it. Sounds good to me.
Also, CMAC asked, I saw it was in a comment earlier. He asked about, is the guy from Nebraska still working? Yes, he's the owner. Mike Frank is the owner of ISD.
The owner of ISD
Yes,
is still involved
and
with ISD.
he'll still be involved with the post game stuff, and yeah, you'll see him then.
Yeah. So to everyone who's watching, we don't really want to blow smoke about what we've heard and everything, because it's not based on anything that Jamie has seen or Matt or Andrew Mentok or anybody like it. They haven't shown us by design, right? They don't want us to know, and so that's just what it is. So that's why it's hard to kind of project what this team is going to be, because they haven't shown us what they want to be, right? And so we talk about the pieces and everything. We could talk about how it might work. For all we know, they're in like 13 personnel a lot of the time, and they're just mashing teams.
I mean, for all I know, like Audric Estime could carry the ball 25 times. He could carry it 3.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I don't know what I don't know what to expect from that. I really don't, because if you said, Chris Tyree got 15 touches, Logan Diggs carried the ball 13 times, Audric Estime had 4 carries, like maybe it could.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it's anything is set, especially because I think with the way it is, I think if like Audric comes in, and it might not even be his fault, but like if a guard gets blown up and then he gets a tackle for loss, then guess what? They're not throwing on second down, or they're not running on second down. You know what I mean? Like, so I think a lot of it is dependent on what they're doing and all that. And, and the success they're having, and if they are like, he's the perfect kind of closer. If they're like, they got a lead and they're running it and Ohio State can't stop it. I mean, Audric Estime could be like a second half monster. But I think a lot of it is going to be, game dependent.
And the other thing too, because we previewed the offensive line, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. And the thing is, if they're controlling the line of scrimmage, that opens up so much, it really does. And that's kind of the key to all this, right? It's hard to be explosive when you can't block. It's hard to be we're talking about Notre Dame being a run heavy team who is, leaning on 12 personnel and all those other things. You can't do that if your line isn't controlling line of scrimmage. Like, so much of what we want Notre Dame to be offensively comes down to whether or not those guys up front are handling the job, right? And if you can do it against Ohio State, you can definitely do it, all the way up into BYU, who's obviously a very good defense. They return a bunch of people. And then you all the way up to Clemson, right? You can handle Ohio State. You can handle pretty much anyone on the schedule until you get to Clemson, and that's kind of a different animal that we'll talk about at the time. But that's kind of how I see it. And Jamie, do you have any final thoughts on the Notre Dame offense, skill positions, that sort of thing?
Not really. I'm excited to kind of see what happens. Yeah. And I think the one thing, you know what? Actually, this will be my one thing that I think, because if you recall in that, obviously that Michigan game, that was probably the biggest, the 2018 game, where Notre Dame played them at home. That was probably the biggest opener that Notre Dame has had. You know, like up until now, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think if you look at that game and where things stood in at the beginning of the season, Miles Boykin, after having a great camp, he had one big catch in that game, but didn't really have a monster game. And obviously that
Yeah,
was
one catch.
Yeah. And obviously Brandon Winbush, whatever, is different, when he was a quarterback and all that too. But it wasn't like predictive of the kind of year that he had. And then especially when Ian Book took over, he kind of took off, right? So I think it'll be interesting to see, like say, even if Audric Semi has 5 carries in this game, well, he could become a workhorse later on, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that can happen during the course of the season and how different guys emerge. And man, I'm ready for ball. Like let's get going. I'm ready to see it. I want to see. I mean, we know the least about Notre Dame's team that we've known, and I'm excited to see it.
So I'm really glad you brought up the 2018 game, okay? Because let's remember the narratives then, right? Okay, so remember, not just the fact that there was a lot of unknown with there. Like, okay, Robert Hainsey was hurt, right? So he came into the game banged up, like the ankle was really bad, right? Similar to Jarrett Patterson, frankly.
It was actually very similar, yeah.
Similar to Jarrett Patterson. And not just that, but they didn't also have like Blake Fisher and Joe Alt like kind of leading the way there, right? And like there was a lot. It was a line in transition, right? And this team kind of isn't. Brandon Winbush, who Ian Book was by all accounts better in camp, but they needed to start Brandon Winbush. Why? Because Dexter Williams was suspended, and Jafar Armstrong, who
was not a running back.
God bless him, right? Like doesn't get time. Like transferred to Illinois and didn't get time for them, right?
Yeah.
He's the starting running back against Michigan, and everyone said that Don Brown is going to eat Chip Long's lunch, and he is going to completely destroy him, and it's a huge mismatch. And 5 minutes into the game, Notre Dame was up 14-0. Like you just don't know, right? And so I think that's a big part of it, right? Like we talk about all these things about what the team is going to be and what they have to do. Like so there's so many comments about what Notre Dame has to do. There are so many ways to win football games, right? It's a one game thing. You get into the game, you find a way to win that game, and then you move on, right? And that's what Notre Dame did. They beat Michigan, right? They given their roster and the way it was all constructed, they shouldn't have beat Michigan, right? And then they kind of showed, like against Ball State and Vanderbilt, like they're not a great football team at this point in time, right? But they won the game they needed to do, figured it out, and then you go to Ian Book. The team looked totally different. Again, like
it is kind of insane that they made the playoff that year.
Yeah, like they made it happen, and that's what you have to do, right? So that I do think that's something important for people to keep in mind. Like what you see opening game may not be what it looks like for the rest of the season. So all right, that's the offensive preview. Thank you for everyone for tuning in this morning. If you're on the West Coast or anything like that, I really appreciate you tuning in because you're a trooper, and you make the show like this go. So thank you for everyone in the chat. If you're listening for the first time or watching for the first time and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel. We are going to sign off here. We'll be doing some stuff. So next week, game weeks are going to be a lot different, right? There's going to be I think Jamie and Mike are going to do a lot of like the daily pod. Are you guys doing the daily pods again?
I think so, but I it's at the boss's whim. Whatever Mike says, we're doing.
We'll see. A lot more video content. That's for sure.
A lot more video content.
Yeah, we're going to be doing previews. We're going to be doing offensive previews, defensive previews, overall game previews. So that there's going to be a lot there. So you're going to want to subscribe to the channel. As people have mentioned before, it is very free. right? This doesn't cost anyone to listen to. So, so yeah, do that for us. Go to irishsportsdaily.com and check out all of our content there. So one more time, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will talk to you very, very